There does seem to still be misinformation.
Lots of misinformation.
In terms of misinformation,
I think that the misinformation
a lot of misinformation out there.
Misinformation
Misinformation out there. Because there's been a lot of misinformation.
But the misinformation,
They may be seeing some misinformation. Don't believe the misinformation out there. The misinformation.
that misinformation,
to the misinformation,
a lot of misinformation,
this intentional misinformation,
Misinformation.
coordinated misinformation,
But there is a lot of misinformation.
Frankly, misinformation.
There's been a lot of misinformation.
misinformation campaign.
The disinformation and misinformation. Intentional misinformation.
misinformation,
Because there's been a lot of misinformation. Given all the misinformation, there's been a lot of misinformation.
That misinformation,
Not misinformation.
some of the misinformation,
Misinformation.
That's why it's misinformation.
There's a lot of misinformation by some of the misinformation.
And there is much misinformation,
This
misinformation campaign,
recent misinformation.
Just a whole lot of misinformation. Misinformation.
There's been a lot of misinformation.
With misinformation.
that misinformation,
Because the misinformation, because there's so much misinformation.
Existence of so-called misinformation.
what the misinformation, intentional misinformation,
Misinformation can
Kind of rife with misinformation.
to get misinformation,
Information that
misinformation,
misinformation.
There was so much misinformation out there.
Misinformation.
Misinformation.
misinformation,
Because of the misinformation.
misinformation.
A lot of misinformation.
There's a lot of misinformation.